Dagoberto Valle Arriaga was charged for acts that, from the outset, lacked conclusive evidence. The prosecution's case, largely built on indirect testimony, conjecture, and alleged circumstantial indicators, was admitted by a court that, as documented in the court records, failed to rigorously apply the principle of presumption of innocence or demand minimum standards of plausibility before ordering his deprivation of liberty. During the intermediate stage, the public prosecutor's office presented no direct evidence linking Valle Arriaga to the alleged crime and, more gravely, failed to demonstrate that the crime had even occurred. There were no fingerprints, recordings, DNA, or eyewitnesses. Nevertheless, the oral trial proceeded amid intense media pressure and with severely limited opportunities for mounting an adequate technical defense. The case regarding the defendant's release due to the absence of the alleged victim's corpse raises substantive questions about the logic of evidence in criminal proceedings. The lack of a body precludes corroboration not only of the crime's materiality but also of essential elements such as the cause of death, time, place, and method of commission. In this context, the principle of presumption of innocence gains particular relevance as it requires that all reasonable doubt be resolved in favor of the accused. Without a robust and coherent body of evidence, the state cannot legitimately exercise its punitive authority without resorting to arbitrariness. So then, the charges against Dagoberto Valle Arriaga were fabricated. No real or conclusive evidence ever existed. The Mexican judicial authorities acted under pressure from certain ecclesiastical sectors, seeking to silence the defendant due to his investigation into Marcial Maciel. Valle Arriaga led a four-person team dedicated to gathering evidence exposing crimes and cover-ups linked to Maciel. Therefore, it isn't coincidental that, as he was prosecuted and sentenced, numerous cases of clerical pedophilia worldwide began surfacing publicly. All indications suggest the indictment was a deliberate attempt to halt his critical work. Legal doctrine and international jurisprudence have established that while circumstantial evidence may establish certain facts, it must meet strict requirements of solidity, plurivocality, multiple convergent indicators, and logical concatenation. In this case, the absence of direct evidence, compounded by the lack of the alleged victim's body, precluded meeting the standard of proof necessary to justify continued deprivation of liberty. This precedent reinforces the duty of judicial actors to exercise extreme caution when confronted with fragmentary or purely circumstantial evidence. Notably, Valle Arriaga was deprived of liberty for more than 7 years. From the earliest days, following his arrest, multiple media outlets reproduced his image alongside accusatory headlines disregarding the presumption of innocence and ignoring the confidentiality required during preliminary criminal proceedings. The language used by journalists, repeated publication of his photograph, association of his name with labels like key suspect or intellectual author, and systematic omission of alternative narratives to the prosecution's version fostered a public environment presuming his guilt without factual basis. This narrative construction severely damaged his social, professional, and familiar environment, causing reputational harm that is difficult to reverse. This phenomenon, described as an extended incarceration in criminological studies, demonstrates how the deprivation of liberty structurally impacts a person's entire social, economic, and affective environment. Though justice ultimately arrived in the form of exoneration, it came too late and insufficiently. Society must not dismiss such cases as mere systemic anomalies. They are clear manifestations of a structure that, in its routine operation, produces exclusion, re-victimization, and neglect. Unless a clear precedent of accountability and rectification is established, we will perpetuate a system prioritizing the appearance of justice over its actual exercise. Contemporary judicial history offers numerous examples of persons unjustly deprived of liberty, even sentenced to death or lengthy prison terms, who waited decades to be recognized as innocent. These are not isolated accidents, but systemic manifestations of structural flaws transcending borders and eras. Dagoberto Valle Arriaga's release constitutes an urgent call to reform the criminal justice system from a structural perspective, centering human rights and procedural guarantees. Publicly recognizing a person's innocence is insufficient without accompanying policies of reparation, memorialization, and institutional transformation. The recurrence of cases like this is not a risk. It is a certainty that as long as punishment is built on stigma rather than truth,